lost beneath grey skies. Hearts hold the tales of valor lost. Side by side we count the cost.
Welcome to World War II Explained, a podcast by allhistoryhub.com. Clear stories, real history, and the events that shaped our world explained simply. Let's begin.
December 7th, 1941. It's that famous line from Roosevelt, right? A date which will live in infamy.
Mm-hmm.
And the story we all know is that the attack on Pearl Harbor was this total shock, a bolt from the blue that no one saw coming.
Yeah, and that's the popular narrative, that the surprise was absolute. But that's precisely what we're going to challenge in this deep dive.
Okay.
Because when you really dig into the history, I mean, the evidence that analysts found later, it's just staggering. There was a pattern of alarms, of detailed reports going back almost 20 years.
So this wasn't just a failure in the last 24 hours?
Not at all. We're talking about a systemic intelligence failure. The mission today is to break down 9 of these key signals that U.S. leadership either misunderstood, ignored, or just plain failed to connect.
And we're going to walk you through it all, from these long-term prophecies by people who were basically cast out to the frantic final minutes where everything just fell apart. Let's unpack this failure to connect the dots.
Our first set of warnings really gets at the danger of, resisting new ideas, sticking to old ways of thinking.
Right. And this starts way back, almost 2 decades before the attack.
It does. With a truly astonishing prophecy from Brigadier General Billy Mitchell.
This is the World War I aviation hero. Very controversial figure, I understand.
Oh, absolutely. He was convinced that air power had made the mighty battleship completely obsolete, and that did not make him popular.
I can imagine.
But his 1924 report is it's chilling. He didn't just say there'd be a war with Japan. He predicted a surprise air attack on Pearl Harbor.
Okay, that's specific.
It gets more specific. He said the assault would hit both Hawaii and the Philippines. But the detail that really gets you, the one that's just uncanny, is the timing.
What did he say?
He predicted the attack would happen early morning, around 7:30 a.m.
Wow. And the attack actually started, just before 8 there?
Around 7:55 a.m., so he was off by less than half an hour, 17 years in advance.
So how did the top brass, the Battleship Admiralty, react to this blueprint for disaster?
With total scorn. I mean, Mitchell was court-martialed a year later for insubordination, for basically calling his superiors incompetent.
So they just threw it out.
They laughed him out of the room. It's a classic example of an institution just refusing to hear an inconvenient but revolutionary truth.
Okay, so if Mitchell gave them the theory, the next warning gave them the proof. This is Admiral Yarnell's drill in 1932.
Right. Fleet Problem 13th. It was supposed to be a routine exercise, but Yarnell, who was a big believer in aircraft carriers, he decided to test Mitchell's theory.
So he simulated the attack.
He did. On a Sunday morning, no less. He used carrier-based biplanes, flew the men under the cover of a rain squall, total radio silence, and achieved what the referees called absolute surprise.
And the result?
They declared the port and the fleet destroyed.
So they had a successful dry run. They proved the base was incredibly vulnerable. What was the reaction this time?
This is where it gets really frustrating.
Yeah.
The senior admirals, they annulled Yarnell's victory. They wiped it from the record.
On what grounds?
2 reasons. First, they said attacking on a Sunday was, and I quote, dishonorable and unmilitary.
As if the enemy would play by the rules of gentlemanly conduct.
Exactly. And second, there was this really arrogant, frankly racist assumption that Japanese pilots just didn't have the skill for that kind of precise attack.
But the irony is somebody was paying attention to Yarnell's report.
Oh, yes. Our sources say Japanese military diplomats studied that after-action report very, very closely for their own planning. We literally wrote the playbook, threw it away, and they picked it up.
Incredible. And that leads to the third early warning, which wasn't a drill at all. This was real-world proof.
The Taranto Blueprint, November 1940. This is when the British Royal Navy launched a carrier strike against the Italian fleet, which was anchored in the very shallow harbor of Taranto.
And this was important because Pearl Harbor was also a shallow harbor.
That's the key. It was only about 12 meters deep. The U.S. Navy believed that shallow depth was a natural defense against aerial torpedoes, that they just stick in the mud.
But the British figured out a way around that.
They did. They attached these simple wooden stabilizers to their torpedoes. It stopped them from diving too deep. Taranto proved, without a shadow of a doubt, that ships in a harbor like Pearl were sitting ducks.
An ally just handed them a hard-won lesson. So did they install torpedo nets? Did they do anything?
There were proposals. Some officers saw the writing on the wall, but the idea got bogged down in bureaucratic inertia. They couldn't bring themselves to believe it could happen to them. Meanwhile, the Japanese were inspired and started designing their own shallow water torpedoes specifically for Pearl Harbor.
So now we're moving closer to the attack, into 1940 and 41, and the warnings are getting more high level.
Yeah, we're shifting from tactical theory to strategic failures of leadership. And this starts with our fourth warning, Admiral James O. Richardson.
He was the commander-in-chief of the U.S. fleet, the top guy in the Pacific.
The very top. And he went directly to President Roosevelt repeatedly and argued that parking the entire fleet in Pearl Harbor was a massive, dangerous mistake.
He saw it as a bluff.
A transparent bluff. He said the fleet was isolated, it was undermanned, and it was serving as nothing more than a lure or a sitting duck.
He's telling the president his whole strategy is basically bait.
He is. And Roosevelt's response was sharp. He just said, the fleet will stay where it is because I want it to. It was a political message to Japan, and that was that.
So what happened to Richardson for challenging him?
He was relieved of command in early 1941, fired for being right. The fleet stayed put, a concentrated target, just like you warned.
The next warning then comes from the diplomatic side of things. Ambassador Grew in Tokyo?
Joseph Grew, yeah. In January 1941, he sends a secret telegram back to Washington. He's reporting on what he calls a fantastic rudder he heard from a Peruvian diplomat.
And the rumor was?
That in the event of war, Japan was planning a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor.
Grew himself called it a fantastic rumor, but he still reported it.
Right. He felt it was too serious to ignore, even if it sounded outlandish. But in Washington, it was pretty much dismissed. It just didn't fit their assumptions. They were so focused on a potential attack in Asia, the Philippines, maybe Malaya. The idea of Japan risking a strike 4,000 miles across the Pacific, it was another failure of imagination. They just couldn't conceive of it.
Okay, but now we get to a warning they couldn't dismiss as a rumor. This is the bomb plot cipher from September 1941.
This is where it gets really chilling. The U.S. has this top-secret program called MAGIC, and they're decrypting Japan's highest-level diplomatic codes.
So they're reading their mail?
Essentially, yes. And they intercept a message from Tokyo to the Japanese consul in Honolulu. The instructions are incredibly specific.
What were they?
Divide Pearl Harbor into a grid, a detailed grid, and then report back the exact berthing positions of all the U.S. warships in each sector.
They were building a targeting map. I mean, that's not intelligence gathering, that's attack planning.
It's a smoking gun.
So why on earth wasn't an immediate high-level alert sounded in Hawaii?
This is the tragedy of it. The information was considered so secret, so sensitive, that it was withheld from Admiral Kimmel and General Short, the commanders on the ground in Hawaii.
Wait, they weren't told?
They weren't? Washington was more afraid of Japan finding out they'd broken the code than they were of an attack on the fleet. They chose to protect the source over protecting the target. So the commanders had no idea the Japanese were studying their every move.
And that takes us into the final days, the final countdown.
Right. And now the warnings are they're screamingly obvious. But the system to act on them completely breaks down.
Signal number 7, the WINS code and the burning of secrets.
So U.S. intelligence knew about Japan's WINS code. It was a contingency plan where a specific phrase in a public weather broadcast, something like east wind, rain, would signal a break in relations with the U.S.
A hidden message that war was coming.
A hidden message. But there was something much more direct. Starting on December 2nd, they intercepted orders for Japanese diplomats all over the world to start burning their code books and destroying their cipher machines.
Which is the universal signal for, it's on, war is imminent.
Absolutely. So they knew war was coming, and coming fast. But again, that fatal assumption kicked in. They thought the first blow would fall in Asia. So Pearl Harbor was never put on a high alert for an air attack.
This leads us to maybe the most heartbreaking failure of all, the 14-part ultimatum.
On the night of December 6th, the MAGIC decryptors get this long 14-part message from Tokyo. It's basically a declaration ending negotiations.
The final word.
The final word. They get through 13 parts, Roosevelt reads them, and he reportedly says, this means war. Then, on the morning of December 7th, the final piece comes in.
Part 14.
Not just Part 14, it was an instruction. It told the Japanese diplomats to deliver the entire note at exactly 1:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
And 1:00 p.m. in Washington is?
7:30 a.m. in Hawaii, the exact time of the planned attack, Billy Mitchell's prediction, down to the minute.
They had the timetable. They knew the moment it was supposed to go down.
They had it. But the communication failed catastrophically. General Marshall drafted a final war warning, but instead of using the secure, high-speed military radio, he sent it by commercial telegraph. Western Union.
You're kidding me. Why?
He was worried the Japanese might be listening in on military channels and that it would tip them off. A choice for security over speed that proved fatal.
So what happened to the message?
It arrived in Honolulu hours late. After the first bombs had already fallen, a courier was literally trying to deliver it to General Short's headquarters while the attack was underway.
And all this brings us to the final warnings, the tactical ones, in the last hour.
2 clear signals. At 6:37 a.m., the destroyer USS Ward spots a Japanese mini-submarine trying to sneak into the harbor.
And they sank it.
They did. An undeniable act of war. They reported it immediately. But the duty officer at headquarters, he hesitated. He wanted verification before sounding a general alarm.
Wasting critical time.
Precious minutes. Then, at 7:02 a.m., up at the Yopana Point radar station, 2 privates see something incredible. A massive signal on their screen. More than 50 planes heading straight for them.
The huge, unmistakable signature.
But the duty officer they called, a Lieutenant Tyler, he was inexperienced. And he knew a flight of American B-17s was due in from the mainland.
And he just assumed that's what it was.
He famously told them, don't worry about it. So the submarine attack was stalled by bureaucracy, and the air attack was dismissed by human error. The first wave of Japanese planes arrived at 7:55 a.m. to complete and total surprise.
So when you lay out all 9 of these signals, from Mitchell's prophecy all the way to those radar blips, it wasn't a surprise. It was a failure of synthesis.
That's the perfect way to put it. It wasn't a lack of information. It was an institutional inability to connect the dots. The sources point to 3 root causes. There was mental unpreparedness, this deep-seated belief that Japan wouldn't dare. There was the Byzantine secrecy around magic that blinded their own commanders. And overall, just a profound failure of imagination.
It's such a powerful cautionary tale. The knowledge was there, but it was useless because it was trapped inside biases and bureaucracy. It really shows you why you always have to challenge your core assumptions, especially in times of peace.
And, the tragedy of Pearl Harbor is what led directly to modern coordinated intelligence agencies like the CIA. They were created specifically to prevent this kind of disconnect from ever happening again. But that leaves a pretty provocative thought for you to chew on.
What's that?
In our incredibly complex world today, with a constant flood of information, what unimaginable threat are we currently dismissing? Which voices, the modern Billy Mitchells and Admiral Richardsons, are we ignoring today, simply because their warnings are too inconvenient for the established consensus? That's the challenge that remains.
You've been listening to World War II Explained from allhistoryhub.com. Follow the podcast and join us next episode, where history becomes clear.